Hello, welcome to today's video. Congratulations, you've been asked to do the button or the march times. Either way, both of these roles I'm going to go over in today's videos. I'm going to do it in a couple of sections. The first section, I'm going to go over what each role does. And then the second one, I'll break it down in explanations, how to do each role, show you some examples, so hopefully it's a lot clearer and easier to understand what's going on. So the first role is the march time person who will be watching march times and filling in this side of the spreadsheet, with also keeping an eye on the pets and the times that the pets are popped or gonna run out. The other job is the main button person role. They have to do some offsetting, which will then give us a more accurate time of when to start the timer. This spreadsheet's very handy because once the march times are filled in, you can just do some offsetting, and then it will tell you when the person baggy, for example, in this example, when their rally countdown reaches 34 seconds, you will start a 70-second countdown. The other roles the button person has to do is obviously starting a countdown for when we're calling rallies, when we're calling counter rallies, if we're doing hot swaps, stuff like that, and a little bit more. But it really keeps you on your toes, and you have to be pretty head on with what you're doing. And somewhat the same for the person doing the march times. You need to keep an eye. Usually the person on the button will know if they do their math and there's a massive offset here. They'll know that somebody's potentially popped pets, and they can say, hey, you know, you need to watch your Mang, let's say. His march time's possibly going to have changed. We also can estimate that, you know, if the team we're up against have been consistently within a 2-second gap and it says it's going to be 10, we can adjust the march time so that it brings it back in line with, you know, potentially a 2-second gap, and guess what the person's march time is going to be once they've popped their pets. But that's, you know, basically the two roles. I'll start off by going over the march time person's role, and then we'll move on to the actual button person role a little bit later on. So at the start of the battle, you have a massively important job. You and perhaps a couple of other people, if there's going to be 3 or 4 rallies, it's going to be very hard for you to watch all 4 at the same time. So you might need to get somebody to help you, you know, say, hey, I'll watch Baggy and Shadow, you watch Bubble and Yamang. These are just examples that I've got on screen here. What you're going to have to do, once we get into the castle the first time, we're going to estimate prior to the battle what their march times are going to be. These are purely going to be estimates, and then if I fill them in or somebody else does, I'll put a Y in this column so that you know these march times are estimates. Then what's going to happen is the clock is going to count down. As you can see here in this video from this battle, we have 7 seconds left. What you're going to need to do is watch when this changes from rallying to marching, what their march time is. The best way to do this at the start of the battle is maybe a pen and paper or something, and note it down instead of, you know, looking away from your game to do something else, or mentally, if you can, think, right, 37 seconds or something like that. You're going to have to try and do this accurately for however many rallies there are at the start of the battle. This may change later on. Somebody else might swap in. You know, they might go from 4 rallies to 6 rallies. We're going to have new march times. Obviously, at the start of SVS, this is a lot harder because there's going to be, generally speaking, a lot more people. So if I just show you this clip where I'm watching the rallies here, we count down from 3, 2, 1, and then it swaps to 36. And I call that out so that, you know, it's heard. But that's also me just talking to myself in a way. At this point, I know somebody else is watching. I think this was a solo rally march at this point. So Baggy was just the only caller at the start, so we got 36 from the start. Then, you know, later on, this was a weird one, sorry. The fact that only one person called at the start is a little bit weird. The next rally, we had 2 or 3 more people. Now, if I just skip ahead here a bit, I've gone too far. So you see, I'm watching here just to see what they changed to as well, in case. That's what I'm talking about, basically, is I go a second or 2 back. We'll pause it right here. So this one already changed, but we already knew baggies, sorry. This guy Y, we didn't know. He's 30 seconds. That'll have been filled in at the time. Obviously, it changed later in the battle. But yeah, basically, at the start of the battle, very simple. You're trying to get all the march times. Now, for the pets, you can ask the rally lead, I think it's Chammy usually, to check pets. They can do this. Most of our rally callers know how to do this. They'll check and they will tell you whether the person has pets on or not. Obviously, you constantly want to be asking, hey, can you check pets when you get second? Keep that updated. And obviously, like I said, it'll be blatantly obvious when I or whoever's doing the button does the offsetting and a flag will appear. Let's say we're estimating it should be between 0 and 3. All of a sudden, there's a 10-second gap. We know somebody's popped their pets and we need to correct for that. That's basically the role of the March person. They might get asked to do extra jobs throughout. The notes is just for either noting when the pet's are live, when we notice that they're on, or you would write down the estimated time that they're going to end at. And obviously you can select pets active, pets expired, or no pets, so that you know, and anybody checking the sheet, you know, like Nakaz or Def, etc., can check and go, okay, that guy's pets have expired. We don't need to worry about that person anymore. Now what I'm going to do is I'll move on to explaining what I'm doing on the sheet as the button person. So the other person is filled in the march times. That's perfect. But then we have to do something called offsetting to work out A, which person we're doing the timer with, and B, what the order and gaps are between when the people are landing. So if I just fill in a couple of numbers here, you'll see we've now got a 0, 2, 3, 4. This means that Baggy is landing first, 2 seconds later Y is landing, 3 seconds after Baggy we have Major landing, and then 4 seconds after would be Shadow. Now you might go, how do we work out what these numbers are? Well, I'm going to show you an example and then I shall explain it in a little more depth so that you understand it. I think I've got this time set up.
He hasn't put pets on, has he?
Okay, Baggy called again. Okay, so I've called out Baggy's call.
Okay.
And Y's called as well.
This one's a double.
So what we're going to do here is, before we do anything with the sheet, we're going to wait. We're going to wait and we're going to call our own rallies. So the guys are going to call out when they're ready. We're going to do, let's say, a 45-second timer, because up here I note down what the groups are. So Chammy and Brad's, let's say, are the main rallies at this point, and Def and Nakaz are the counter rallies from another alliance. So we're going to wait for ready calls, and then we're going to call the button.
28, 27, 26,
which
25.
I've clicked on the wrong video. This is definitely a double.
Okay. Alright, should we do a countdown? Bunny, are you ready?
What's your march times?
40,
Do a 45-second timer.
Ready to go.
45, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39,
Yep.
38, 37, 36,
Yep.
35, 34.
So now what I'm going to start doing, that's called, is I'm going to look at Baggy. Baggy called first. So let me tab back out again. Baggy called first. So Baggy is going to be 0. Whoever calls the rally first is always 0. Then what we're going to do is we're going to scroll. At this point, we have to scroll because these two NDU rallies are in the way.
Fucking rallies.
Which is why I've called that out. That's really annoying. So resetting the board gives me it a lot easier. So Baggy's going to be 0 because Baggy called first. We're then looking at the time gap here. Now, I usually wait till 10s and 5s to do my math. So you'll see I've already done the math there. But if we pause here, let's say, we now can clearly see that Y called 5 seconds after Baggy. So in that case, we would, let's delete this for the example. Baggy's a 0. We're then going to go to what we're calling Y at this point. We're going to put a 5, okay? And now it gives us a 0 and a 5, okay? Now this is just coincidence that this number is 5. It could be totally different. What this means is Baggy's the first caller and Y is 5 seconds later. That then, this down here will automatically work out. The green number will be 0, so that's who's going to land first at the castle. And then 5 seconds later, Y will land. But that works out that our button time is, well, we're going to be watching Baggy's rally to reach the countdown of 34 seconds left on the clock. Now, this is this rallying clock. When that reaches 34 seconds, we're going to start a 70-second countdown on the timer, which is here. You'd click this button and it'll start a counter. Now, I can't get the bot to work at the moment, so I won't show you an example of me clicking the button. But that's how that works. Now, it's purely coincidence that these two numbers match. This is just due to their march times being both 36. When you have more, I recommend doing them in 2s. Now, later in the stream, we end up with like 5 rallies at one point. I usually do the first 3. I'll look and go, right, Baggy's 0. This guy's 5 seconds afterwards. Imagine this is 15. We can go, right, he's 10 seconds afterwards. I then would scroll down and use this person and go, right, I know he's 10. The guy after him is 2 seconds after him. That makes him 12 seconds. And you just fill these in the orange column, and then the spreadsheet will do the calculation for you. Should it change due to the march time, who's going to land first, it will tell you. When the rally person, let's say it changes to Yamang, reaches the 34-second time, you're going to start a 70-second button. Now, I'm just going to add in here that once you start the countdown for the 70 seconds, and if it gets to the start of, let's say, in this example, the march time is 36 seconds, if you notice that the countdown is not on with the march time in your game, you will have to manually adjust the button time on the fly as it counts down. Your best way to do this is, let's say it's going down to 25 seconds. You want to click the 25-second button pretty close to it to try and line the countdown timer audio up with what you're seeing in the game. You might have to do this a couple times just if things are pretty off, but generally speaking, they should be bang on. But of course, if they're a couple of seconds out, you want to try line that up as best as you can before the march lands so that people can speed up marches and refills more accurately. It's pretty important to make sure that it is on time. If you're unsure on doing that, then call out and say, hey, the countdown's 2 seconds behind, something like that, so people know what they're aiming for. But generally speaking, rather than calling it out, we want to try adjust it on the fly using the buttons, and trying to make sure that the audio is lined up with what you're seeing in your game. If you need to change the button time that we're using, change it in this box here. The orange is the text that you edit. Anything else you don't edit. Of course, you can change the text in the yellow, just if you want to make your own mental notes. But don't change anything else. You'll break the sheet. Just only change the orange. Calling rallies of our own. Usually Nakas will tell you we want the 45 seconds. The calling of our rally times is very much dependent on what the march times of each person are. Let's say somebody has a 38-second march time. You don't want to use 40 seconds, use 45. This is quite simply just to give them a little bit more time to get ready to do it. They should be ready when you hit the button, but 2 seconds to react is a little bit too touch and go for people. So always, if it's really close to the number you're thinking about using, just add another 5 seconds. We have the buttons here to do that in the lower ends. And realistically, we've never really needed to go as high up here into the hundreds. I think realistically, I've explained any other time that somebody's going to request a button. Let's say we're doing a hot swap or something like that, where it's not quite as normal as what we're used to doing. They'll tell you, they'll say, hey, can we get a 70-second, 60-second, 30-second timer to do this? They'll be clear. Just, go with the instructions. And when you're calling the rally timers, as soon as we get knocked out of the castle, they're potentially going to want to call a rally straight away. Call out for the rally leads. Hey, Chammy, Brads, are you ready? Not ready? Wait for them to call ready, not ready, and then call the button. Otherwise, you might be calling a rally countdown when people's marches are back, etc. Just make sure that you're asking and get confirmation of what's going on. But otherwise, yeah, it's all pretty self-explanatory. And obviously, if you have any questions from my explanation here, reach out to me on Discord or ask in one of the chats and somebody will try and answer your questions. Thank you very much, guys, and I hope this helped. I'll see you in the future.